Hi, my friends. I'm having one of those days where I've made 7,000 videos and none of them are good. So I think I might just make a weird video just to make a video. So I'm sitting here drinking mate. I love mate. Mate is an Argentinian or Paraguayan or Uruguayan or Southern Brazilian drink. It's a green tea, and you pour hot water into the tea with a thermos, and this thermos leaks. You pour water into the mate, it fills up with water, and then it becomes like a soup. And this is lavado, or it's done basically. So everything's floating, but normally it doesn't look like that. And then I drink it through the straw until it makes that sound, and that means I'm done. And then I pour more, or I pass it, or da da da. I might talk a little bit about mate because what I want to talk about today is the meseta, or the plateau, the language learning plateau. This thing that you've all reached for sure. If you can understand this video, you've at some point, or you are currently at a plateau. Plateau meaning the point in a journey where you're no longer climbing up a hill, up a mountain, but you've reached a plateau, which is literally a type of mountain or geological formation that, instead of being pointy like a mountain or round like a mountain, is flat on the top. So you're climbing up, 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 and then suddenly you plateau. And plateau is also a verb, which means to be going up, up, up and progressing, and then suddenly to have stopped and be just moving straight. So these plateaus happen in the language learning process. They happen much more frequently the better you get in the language. In the beginning, it seems that you're progressing, and you reach fewer of these stages where you feel stuck or frustrated, or even like you're possibly moving backwards, where you feel you have plateaued, or you're no longer progressing as much as you'd like to. But if you're understanding this video, I would argue that you're probably at an advanced level or an intermediate, upper intermediate level, C1, B2. You probably think you're at B1. You probably think you're at an intermediate level, and that's totally normal. We tend to underestimate our language skills the better we get. And if you're at that level, it means you've started to reach these plateaus. And the thing I think we need to normalize and talk much more about in the language learning community is how common and normal these phases are, and how there's absolutely nothing wrong with them, but how there are ways to make traveling across them more pleasant and more useful, like to get more out of the experience of crossing, going through these times when one is not noticing one's progress as much as before. So there's a lot to say about these plateaus, these mesetas. I really like the Spanish equivalent for the word, because the word plateau has kind of negative connotations in English, and it's not an English word anyways. So I'm sort of playing around with just using this word meseta because I speak Spanish. I like to speak Spanish, and why not use the Spanish word? So, and start over, give it, plateau is a bad one and meseta is a good thing, right? We have that. English has that wiggle room, or has that flexibility. So I'm going to start using the word meseta more. I also have a lot of language learners who speak Spanish, and way more who speak Spanish than who speak French. So maybe when I say the word meseta, it will conjure up an idea in your mind that will have more resonance than if I say plateau. But I'm making up, but that is a Spanish word, just to be clear. It's not yet an English word, whereas plateau is both a French word and an English word. You can find it in an English dictionary, and it's used in English speech. So, but what I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to talk about how wonderful the plateau can be. And so I'm sitting here drinking mate, and I'm just thinking about how Argentinians drink mate when they drive. Now, you have to pour this water into this teeny little thing. This thermos drips, but to do, and then you pass it to the person driving, and the person driving has to drink it while driving. And if they have to change gears, they have to like hold it in the, right? Now, doing that while driving through Buenos Aires is something that happens every day. And I've been in cars where that's happening, and it is what it is. They know how to do it. But there are certain moments where it's kind of impossible to do. One of them is when you're going up a hill, right? So you have to be, you're changing gears. You don't have enough hands. You don't have enough hands. You need a hand for the mate, you need a hand for the steering wheel, and you need a hand to shift gears. So you just can't. But then in the place I was living in Argentina before, you have these mesetas, or you have these places where you've gone uphill and now you're just going flat. I lived on between two mountain ridges. So there were two mountain ridges on either side. And then we were on sort of a mountain ridge. We lived in the valley below. And so for about half an hour between the closest town and where we lived, it was a very rural area. We would drive across this, essentially a meseta, or just this very flat piece of land, before we descended into the valley. And we would be traveling on that road for about half an hour. And so along that road, one could drink mate and you could just look around. And so there was something really, really beautiful about being able to just observe and take in the scenery, because there was nothing happening except it was a straight line. And this is the kind of road I used to walk on when I lived there. And I loved, and I discovered the joy of going for walks on mesetas. I hadn't experienced it before, and it's now something I have where I live. I seek them out. So I will seek walks where I can maybe do a little bit of a hill, but then I can just walk straight. Because what ends up happening is, because it's just a nice smooth ride, or it's just a nice smooth walk, I take that walk every single day, or at least every other day. So I walk more frequently. So there are things about the meseta, the fact that it isn't this constant struggle. You aren't climbing up when you're on the learning plateau. It's not like when you're starting out and you don't have so much to work with and everything you learn is new. And yes, you move really quickly, but it's also, there's a lot of struggle and work that's involved. And you reach this plateau, you reach this meseta, and you can kind of breathe a little bit, and you can look around and you can say, all right, what do I like? What do I want to do? And what it was like for me when I would walk on this meseta in Argentina is that I noticed for example, there was one tree that I noticed, and it's actually the tree that's in the icon of my YouTube channel and the newsletter. And it's a tree I would watch season after season after season. And I just thought it was one of the most beautiful trees. And I would never have noticed one particular tree if I'd been hiking up a mountain, for example, right? And there were other times where I would notice this herd of cows, or I would notice there was time and space to sort of just take in this slower, this view that was changing less frequently than, it's just, so I'm going to try to put this video out without editing it. So now I'm like at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to make mistakes, so I should start over, except I've now done that 15 times. So I'm just going to keep going. So yeah, so basically, I think you get the point. So when you've reached a plateau, if you're on a plateau, if you've arrived at the place where the plateaus are coming more and more frequently, and you're walking across this plateau or this meseta, and you're like kind of getting bored with it and kind of feeling like you just want something a little more exciting and more challenging. And I get it, because it's a new type of terrain. You're in a new type of terrain. The thing is, we got to get used to this type of terrain or this type of landscape, because that's where we're going to be for the rest of the journey. And if we fight against it, and if we wish that we were progressing at this, if we were climbing and climbing and climbing, when that's just not the way it's going to look for most people in this stage, unless, you're preparing to get a master's degree in London, or you want to retake the first certificate or something like that. Like, there are ways to, if that's something that appeals to you, there are ways to make the climb, make it more of a climb again, if that feels good to you. But for a lot of people, that's not sustainable, right? You got it. And if it's constantly a climb, you may walk or you may climb that road less frequently. And it's actually in the process of doing it every day and returning to the journey, returning to the walk, walking that road day after day after day, where you actually start to gradually move from a place of feeling stuck to a place of feeling like there's movement. It's just at a different pace. There are roads that are great for bike riding, and there are great roads that are great for hiking, and they're not necessarily the same roads, right? Amsterdam is a wonderful city for riding bikes, and Switzerland, it's not as much fun, unless you're in a valley or on a plateau, right? There are places that lend themselves to certain types of behaviors, right? So when you're at this stage of the journey, one of the biggest things is to try to notice the resistance you may have to the fact that this is happening. And just notice, it's really important just to notice that when there is resistance to the fact that you've reached this phase and you want to be climbing, and you feel frustrated by the fact that your progress is not going up as much as you wish it were, and instead is improving very slowly, or you feel that that's the case. I would argue that the first thing to start to do is just recognize that that's normal, and it means that you've reached the intermediate level at the very least, and likely you've reached the advanced level, which means you've done the hard work. And now you get to sit back and drink your mate and talk to your friend on this nice slow climb and enjoy all the fruits of your labor. You've put in so much work to have gotten to this point, and there are a lot of people that quit before they got to a plateau. And those people don't understand what I'm saying in English. They might be watching with subtitles, but that's not. Most of my students have reached these plateaus because they're intermediate or advanced speakers. And those are the people that I help, that I work with. So there's just definitely a piece of congratulating yourself and being proud of yourself for having gotten to this point. And then to recognize that it's normal to feel frustrated. It's normal to feel confused because it's a little bit different than it was before. And yet there are things you can do. So I'm going to leave it there, because this is not my best video, but I'm trying to show up and put out videos every week, and little by little they'll get better and they'll get worse. And it's not going to be I'm plateauing with my YouTube videos. I'm at a plateau, and I think this video is not quite as good as the one I did last week. And yet there had been progress. So perhaps that's what I needed to hear today, was, to realize, okay, that's okay. Because next week, at least I'm not going backwards. And maybe I am a little bit, but maybe it's an optical illusion. And that's often the case with language learning as well. That when you think you're going backwards, you're actually just standing still, and you may be progressing. You may be about right. We'll talk about that in another video. I'm just going to go back to drinking my mate and having a enjoying this cloudy Sunday, but it's summer here, and happy summer to you if it's summer, happy winter if it's winter. And like the video if you like it, even if you hate it. I don't know. But I will see you next week, and subscribe to the newsletter, and I will send out some newsletters. I didn't last week, but I will next week. Anyways, here we go. That's what it is today. Have a great week, guys. Bye.